It is my pleasure to present to you current management option of IBS in India and also the way forward. We all know that irritable bowel syndrome is a common disorder in gastroenterology practice. So therefore, its management is very important in clinical practice. Now before going to the presentation proper, let me share with you a story of a real patient. This is a 28-year-old female who is doctor by profession and currently residing in Hyderabad. Hyderabad is located in southern part of India, and she presented there with abdominal discomfort and feeling of distension for 3 to 4 years, flatulence, irregular stool form and frequency, mucus, and incomplete evacuation. She did not report any alarm symptom. What is the diagnosis? All of you will agree with me that possibly she is suffering from irritable bowel syndrome. But we got further clue on her management when we questioned her further. She reported that when she is in Hyderabad, her symptoms are less. And I told you that Hyderabad is located in southern part of India. But when he comes to her original home, which is in northern part of India, in Lucknow, her symptoms are increased. Now what could be the reason for this? Is it possible that it is related to variability in stress level in Hyderabad, where she resides in hostel, than in Lucknow, where she resides at home? This is not a tenable explanation, because stress is expected to be less at home than in hostel. She denied having much stress in either place, and she disliked consultation with several physicians who sent her to psychiatrist. And she said she doesn't have any psychological comorbidity. Could it be related to dietary variation? Yes, possible. Because with southern part of India, where Hyderabad is located, the staple diet is rice-based. On the other hand, in northern part of India, where she has her home, the diet is predominantly wheat-based. And she reported that she loves taking wheat and milk product like paneer, and her mother gives these in plenty whenever she comes back to home. And this gave clue to the further management of this patient. What we did is, we did a lactose hydrogen breath test and we found that she is positive. We also did a fructose hydrogen breath test and she was positive to it. So therefore our diagnosis was irritable bowel syndrome associated with severe lactose intolerance and fructose intolerance. And we explained to her the situation. We asked her to avoid wheat-based diet and milk product, and she did reasonably well. We explained to her that if she wants to take this like wheat and milk product, she can only take this with suffering from symptoms. So therefore, this is called explanatory model, where we explain the patient pathophysiology of her symptoms, and she decided not to have symptoms, and therefore she started avoiding wheat and milk product. So this is the explanatory model in the Rome 4 criteria which is going to come. What are the alarm symptoms? Pain that interferes with sleep, diarrhea that interferes with sleep, blood in the stool visible or occurred, weight loss, fever, and abnormal physical examination, and she did not have any of these. Now, we diagnose irritable bowel syndrome in this patient based on Rome 3 criteria. But should we use Rome 3 criteria? At least in India, several physicians and gastroenterologists have reservations in using Rome 3 criteria, because they feel that Rome 3 criteria underestimates the diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. And in fact, this has been substantiated in a study where a large number of patients, that is more than 1600 patients, were actually evaluated to see that whether Manning, Rome 1, Rome 2, Rome 3, and recently proposed Asian criteria, which one did well, and we found Manning criteria was the best, Asian criteria was next best, and Rome 3 criteria did okay. So therefore in India now Manning criteria is more often being used. However, with time to come, we expect some change in the Rome 4 criteria, which will lead to wider application of these criteria. Now, second issue that we have to discuss is IBS a disease? It is a syndrome, and it is a symptom-based diagnosis, and therefore several pathophysiological mechanisms such as lactose intolerance or any other dietary intolerance, psychological factor, and biological modifier can lead to be confounded in the diagnosis and management. This is called multidimensional clinical profile, or MDCP, which Rome is proposing in Rome 4 criteria. So in the MDCP, one has to talk about a diagnostic category, the subtype, that is diagnostic category is whether irritable bowel syndrome, then subtype, is it diarrhea predominant, constipation predominant, pain predominant, severity, overlap, is there an overlap with functional bowel disorder, other functional bowel disorders such as functional dyspepsia, is there a psychological modifier, like this patient did not have any psychological modifier, is there biological or physiological modifier like this patient had. So when I see a patient, I look at the following issues, that what I see is, what is the major issue? Is the major issue peripheral or dietary, or is it psychological? Like this patient, the major issue was peripheral and more so dietary, and psychological issue was not major. On the other hand, one can get patient where psychological issues are major. Then I look at what is the subtype. Is it IBS constipation? Is it IBS diarrhea? Is it IBS alternative? Or is it IBS mixed? Now for subtyping, in India, frequency-based criteria cannot be used. Stool frequency cannot be used in subtyping, because we found in a pan-Indian study that stool frequency in patient with diarrhea predominant IBS and constipation predominant IBS is quite similar. Therefore, we use this Asian criteria, which propose that Bristol stool type 1, 2, 3 is constipation predominant IBS, and stool type 5 and above is diarrhea predominant IBS. One can use Rome criteria, Rome 3 criteria for subtyping, where the multiple factors are taken into consideration, including Bristol stool type. However, even in the Rome 3, fewer than 3 defecations per week still is considered for the diagnosis of constipation. Therefore, there is a reservation in using this particular criteria in Indian patient. But again, we hope in Rome 4 things will be different and will have wider applicability. Now, what could be the physiological modifier like this patient had? In IBS constipation, physiological modifier could be fecal evacuation disorder and slow colonic transit. In IBS diarrhea, there could be several physiological modifiers such as lactose or fructose intolerance like this patient had, bile acid malabsorption, celiac disease, non-celiac gluten intolerance, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and post-infectious etiology. This is a study where we compared frequency of lactose intolerance among patients with IBS and healthy control, and we found in India as high as 70% patients with IBS has lactose intolerance or lactose malabsorption, but also similar frequency of lactose malabsorption was found in healthy subjects. But interesting in this study, patients with irritable bowel syndrome more often reported symptom following lactose load than healthy subject, suggesting visceral hypersensitivity as a modifier of development of symptom in patient with irritable bowel syndrome with lactose malabsorption. This may be related to the fact that in this study we use 50 gram lactose dose for diagnosis of lactose intolerance. Currently we undertook a study where we compared 50 gram, 25 gram and 12 gram lactose load, and we found that 25 gram lactose load predict the relief in symptom following lactose withdrawal in Indian patient, and this is quite likely because 50 gram lactose load is quite non-physiological load. Constipation predominant IBS, how to manage? The first line of management will be fiber supplementation is if fiber intake is low. But if fiber intake is already high, then fiber supplementation may not be a good option. And in fact, if bloating is a common symptom, like it is there in many patients with constipation predominant IBS, adding fiber may increase bloating. In those patients, milk of magnesia, which is not currently widely available in Indian market, and polyethylene glycol, which is quite widely available, may be better choices. If they don't respond to these drugs, then the second line drugs include colonic prokinetics such as prucalopride, which is a 5-HT4 agonist, intestinal secretagogues such as lubiprostone, which is a chloride channel activator, colonic stimulant like bisacodyl, sodium polycarbophil, and lactulose. Now, is bisacodyl useful or safe in patients with irritable bowel syndrome? Earlier it was a myth that bisacodyl should not be used in irritable bowel syndrome constipation because it is a stimulant laxative and may not be safe. However, if we look at GERD management, we have shifted from step-up approach to top-down approach. Is it possible that we should do the same with management of functional bowel disease such as irritable bowel syndrome? Quite likely, because patient will be more compliant to the physician if he or she gets a quick relief. This is a study from UK, from Michael Camp group, who randomized patient with constipation into bisacodyl and placebo. And this was a multicentric study involving 27 UK centers. 2-week baseline period. Subsequently, patient received in a randomized manner 10 mg bisacodyl once daily or placebo. 247 patients received bisacodyl and 121 placebo. And subsequently, during 4-week follow-up, they looked at stool diary, and what they found is spontaneous bowel movement was better with bisacodyl than with placebo, and all secondary parameters improved in the drug group, and drug was well tolerated. So this study is a study which shows maybe bisacodyl can be used as a therapy when required, and may raise a question whether top-down approach is better than step-up approach in management of these patients. Abdominal bloating is a major issue in patients with irritable bowel syndrome, particularly those who have constipation. Some will show having visible abdominal distension. On the other hand, some will have feeling of abdominal distension, which they will interpret as bloating. Now, what are the drugs and diet that increase abdominal bloating? Fiber, lactulose, excess vegetable, large amount of wheat, excess fructose or fructan in the diet, excess milk and milk product, excess dietary fiber, and excess fat in the diet. They all increase abdominal bloating. So therefore, in patients with abdominal bloating, this should better be avoided. On the other hand, saline laxative, purgative, lubiprostone, prokinetic like colokinetic, rice-based diet and dietary proteins don't increase abdominal bloating. So IBS with bloating, the first line is probiotic, because in multiple studies and meta-analysis it has been shown that bloating is a symptom which is often improved by probiotic. If there is no response, then we do a glucose hydrogen breath test, and those who are positive, we use rifaximin. But rifaximin can be tried even without doing glucose hydrogen breath test, because now we have realized glucose hydrogen breath test has a low sensitivity, though specificity is quite high. Low FODMAP food is useful in management of IBS, particularly those who have abdominal bloating, and these are some of the diets which are low FODMAP diet, and they can be liberally used in patients like this. These are high FODMAP diet which are better avoided in patients with irritable bowel syndrome in general and bloating in particular. These are also examples of high FODMAP diet. Now, what is the evidence that low FODMAP diet is better than high FODMAP diet? This is profile of breath hydrogen production in patients with IBS and irritable IBS and healthy subject, and this study showed that high FODMAP diet lead to excess production of gas both in IBS patient and healthy subject. Recently, from Australia, Peter Gibson group did a study which was published in Gastroenterology, where they found in a randomized trial that low FODMAP diet improves bloating, abdominal pain, and passage of wind in patients of irritable bowel syndrome. Diarrhea predominant IBS, first line of therapy will be loperamide or difenoxylate. Difenoxylate also contain anticholinergic, therefore some patient will report side effect due to it. Now those who don't respond, ramosetron 5 microgram or alosetron, which is not widely available, can be used. Ondansetron can be a theoretical choice, but however studies are limited on this. Another option in diarrhea predominant IBS is rifaximin, particularly in those who have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and cholestyramine, which is a bile acid binding agent, therefore it works in patients with bile acid malabsorption. Rifaximin is more effective in patients with a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth presenting with IBS, and we all know that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is present in 10 to 15% patients with IBS. Now, when to suspect small intestinal bacterial overgrowth in patients with IBS, what are the clinical clues? Predominant symptom of diarrhea like more than 3 stools per day, or Bristol stool type more than 4, or diarrhea IBS as defined by Rome criteria, they more often have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Marked milk intolerance, older age of onset, marked abdominal bloating, flatulence as a predominant symptom, onset of symptom while on PPI or proton pump inhibitor, and history of response to antibiotic or probiotic in the past are the clues to suggest that this patient may be having small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. There are also some data to suggest that female gender is more often associated with SIBO than male gender. Now, is there a role for entamoeba histolytica in irritable bowel syndrome? This is an important question in Indian context. Why? Because many physicians use anti-amoebic drugs such as metronidazole in management of refractory to treat irritable bowel syndrome, and we have found in a pan-Indian study that as high as 50% patients with irritable bowel syndrome reported improvement. But in 2 studies done from India, one from our center and other from AFMC Pune, both studies showed that irritable bowel syndrome has nothing to do with entamoeba histolytica. In fact, the terminology non-dysenteric amoebic colitis is a misnomer. These are patients with irritable bowel syndrome who have amoebic cyst in their stool, and often these are non-pathogenic. Therefore, if at all metronidazole work in patients with irritable bowel syndrome, it is because of its action on the gut flora, including small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Now, these are meta-analysis on probiotic and irritable bowel syndrome, and they found the abdominal bloating improved in most studies on probiotic. Therefore, we use probiotic when a patient has bloating as the predominant symptom. Pain predominant IBS, the first line drugs would be anticholinergic, but anticholinergics are often associated with side effects such as dryness of the mouth, then palpitation. Some patient will even have a problem with urination, particularly those who are elderly and have prostatic hypertrophy. In patients with bronchial asthma, this cannot be used. Therefore, the other choices would be meveferin, which is a visceral smooth muscle relaxant, otilonium bromide, and pinaferium. So these will be considered as the first line therapy in pain predominant IBS because these drugs actually reduce spasm. If there is no response, one can use tricyclic antidepressant such as amitriptyline, imipramine, and dothierpine. SSRI or serotonin reuptake inhibitor such as citalopram, depoxetine, fluoxetine, paroxetine, and sertraline. Serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor such as SNRI such as duloxetine and desvenlafaxine. Obviously, gastroenterologist have to be familiar with some of these drugs and use according to their choice. There is limited data on comparison of these drugs in irritable bowel syndrome. How do these drugs work? They are serotonin modulator. Serotonin, 95% of the body's serotonin is in the gut and 5% is in the brain. Gut serotonin is released from presynaptic nerve ending. Once they work in the postsynaptic membrane, they are taken back by the presynaptic nerve ending by a protein called serotonin reuptake protein. And these drugs, which are conventionally known as antidepressant, even the subtherapeutic dose or in a dose in which they do not work so well in the depression patient, actually work as a modulator of serotonin reuptake protein, and that's why they are considered as visceral analgesic. What is the role of serotonin in different types of IBS? Serotonin influences secretory, absorptive, motility, and sensory function. Therefore, IBS constipation is associated with low serotonergic activity, IBS diarrhea associated with high serotonergic activity. Serotonin works in the gut predominantly by 5-HT1, 5-HT3, 5-HT4, and 5-HT7 receptor. And most of the drugs which are used today are either 5-HT3 or 5-HT4 modulator. 5-HT3 receptor antagonists are allosetron, ramosetron, ondansetron, and palinositron. They slow the gut transit, reduce intestinal secretion, hence they are useful in IBS-D. Side effects are constipation and ischemic colitis. 5-HT4 agonists are tegaserod and prucalopride. They increase gut transit, increase gastric accommodation, and they also reduce visceral sensation. Therefore, they are useful in IBS constipation and pain of IBS. Side effects are diarrhea, headache, ischemic colitis, cardiac and cerebral side effect. Now let me tell you, many of the Western models where we have randomized patient of irritable bowel syndrome into one drug and placebo have drawback. Because IBS is a syndrome without a single pathophysiological mechanism. This is a polysymptomatic disorder. Therefore, we do not expect that one particular drug to relieve all the symptoms of IBS, such as anxiety, depression, globus, heartburn, dyspepsia, abdominal pain, altered bowel habit, urinary problems, sexual dysfunction, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and so on. Therefore, I think multiple pharmacological agents are required to manage this patient, and non-pharmacological agents such as psychotherapy, behavior therapy, and even dietary manipulation are needed in this patient, and more data are emerging in this decade on this issue. Asian IBS consensus recommended polytherapy over monotherapy in management of IBS. Thank you so much.